Everyone, and good afternoon to our panelists. There's just one change in the agenda. I know we're a hard act to follow. You'll see that over the next 20 minutes. But there is one more speaker after us. Bon and Bo is going to talk. So just wanted to let you know that. So there's not a mad rush to the bar, just yet. So.
Bono from U2 is here. U2 is here. Is that what you're saying?
if you want, yes. Virtually anyway. So. Well, this is great. I mean, we have a chance to talk to two practitioners in the space, and we're all keenly interested to hear from them how they're leveraging content marketing, advertising, and analytic technologies to transform their efforts so they can win and grow their business. The interesting thing, I thought maybe I'd start with you, Mike, and then have you, Jill, to tell us a little bit about this tech transformation journey that we're all on. What's been the most interesting part for you and your firm? And then Jill will ask you the same question.
Yeah, I'd say for Forbes, it was the huge transformation we made in 2010, which was where we changed our whole model of journalism, as we called it, in terms of creating a new newsroom for the digital age, which now sounds so dated. But in 2010, that was kind of a cool path in terms of explaining what we were trying to do. And it was really converting to try to create a sustainable and scalable model for journalism. No one needs to be told here the pressures it was under. The whole global bureau system was just unsustainable anymore in terms of as a business model. So we created a contributor network, which is now about 2,600 contributors, that gave us a breadth of content and a depth of content that you never could do in a newsroom. Now, it also catapulted us forward in terms of a digital property because the volume of content you publish contributes to your search your search ranking, and Forbes is off the charts in its search ranking now. So it was the reason it was most interesting part was it was very transformative for us. It was something that was covered by the industry, but the industry generally reacts to really different models. First by throwing Rotten Tomatoes, and they threw tomatoes at us for 2 years or so. And then after 2 years, when syndicated research and everyone saw that our audience was growing by leaps and bounds and our content was being distributed in new ways that Forbes in the past had never, over the past 101 years, had never gotten that wide an audience before, and a global audience. They started to call us up and say, hey, can we come in and can you tell us what the secret sauce is? And there was literally a period of about a year where I finally had to say no more visitors because we were getting people from all over the world. So it was very, that kind of transformation where, and I think blockchain's in the same place, is, there are a lot of people who say, don't even mention that word in our agency or to our clients. But I think you're going to see a real rapid transformation coming up on a lot of technologies, which we can talk about.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jill, how about yourself at Nat Geo? What's kind of been the most interesting part of the tech transformation ride?
Well, I would say in general, change is just hard. And I think when you talk about that in relationship to National Geographic and what makes it sometimes challenging, a bit of context as to who we are is helpful. So National Geographic just turned 130 years old, and it has always been beloved for its ability to connect with audiences through visually arresting storytelling. And it started out as a journal, and I think consistently found a way to create a signal through the noise and augmented its storytelling and the work of the magazine. I think so many people have a strong affinity and affection for this brand because of the relationship that they have with that product, the published magazine, and the fact that it brought people the world and everything in it long before the internet and Instagram. And as it evolved, it created a licensed product extension business. It created a travel business where we could actually take people to those amazing places in a way that only National Geographic could. And it leaned very heavily into what was happening with digital. It is the most followed brand on social media. And I think, wisely, because it realized that we had the best photographers in the world. And we felt, who better than these photographers to curate for a platform like Instagram. But on the side of all that, it had a television channel, and that television channel was launched in a joint venture with 21st Century Fox. And what happened was 3 years ago, there was a first joint venture maybe 20 years ago, but 3 years ago, we disrupted our own business model so that we could really lean into what was happening in the need to create content that could live across platforms under one single entity. So National Geographic Partners was formed, taking every last working media asset and product asset to create a for-profit, purpose-driven media company. And so the company that has been around for 130 years is the nonprofit. 27% of the proceeds from the media company go back to the nonprofit so that they can fund in grants and investing in expeditions and education so that we can ensure that we can continue to understand the world around us in our role in it so we can keep the planet in balance. So there are a lot of things happening and a lot of moving parts at National Geographic, and the ambition of understanding that the total is greater than the sum of the parts when you bring together a multi-platform media set of assets, and that you can amplify stories across different platforms in sort of platform-specific ways is something that everyone agrees with, but getting teams who lived in a very specific silo or island related to their travel business or their editorial room or their content strategy for a television network has been challenging. But I think, you know, data has been the savior, and really sort of understanding that, you know, when we've made massive investments in technology, which we can talk about. But I think it's just that sense that, you know, the ambition and the awareness that change needs to happen, and integration can lead to greater things, and the power of technology to enable that is one thing, but facilitating that change is the challenge. And I came from MasterCard, where it was a very fast-moving technology company, and you just kind of made moves. There wasn't as much selling as to why that made sense.
Well, let's stick with those two themes for a second, technology and change. You know, we have the opportunity to chat with the CEO and the CMOs of publishing companies, and we've got an audience of a lot of technologists. If you had to share with them, Jill, one thing from a technology standpoint that really stood out as a success for you and your journey at National Geographic, what would that be?
Well, we had to do a lot to really fix the basics, you know. So one of the things I'm quite proud of is, you know, over the last 2 years, we've worked really closely with our technology team to actually create a unified and consistent experience for the consumer, because we all know how important that is. The brand was presenting itself in kind of a schizophrenic way. When I joined, there were over 200 expressions of the brand, and I like to say that because the brand was so well loved, that anyone that had an idea for a new product or a new way to execute the product created their own sort of version of that incredibly powerful, you know, yellow border and yellow portal, as we're calling it now. And so there was a lot of sort of streamlining the look and the feel and creating a consistent design, but then executing a stronger digital experience for the consumer is something that we've spent a lot of time on. And so we've recently migrated from a shocking 20 disparate CMS systems into a single CMS system, so that the way the consumer experiences the brand is not only consistent, but sort of designed to be mobile first and sort of and all of those things. So from there, I think, you know, the opportunity to do the things that we need to do around driving personalization and monetization make that much easier.
So talk to us for a second about the human impact on that technology decision. You went from 20 down to 1.
Yeah.
And folks were used to using a certain technology, and then you moved their cheese, literally.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me how you all dealt with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of, you know, it's a little bit of kind of iron fist in a velvet glove, because, you know, to sort of deliver on glove, I think I said that wrong, but anyway, the ambition of what this for-profit venture, I mean, that's been the big change, right? We have a lot of people working in a for-profit venture who grew up in a nonprofit mentality, and so, you know, the difference in how they think about, you know, sort of top-line revenue versus the things that we care about at the, you know, the CEO and CMO level, which is, you know, real EBITDA, is a bit different. And so there was a bit of, you know, kind of the soft sort of hand-holding, you know, sort of selling the future vision and why this was going to matter and how this was going to drive a better consumer experience. There were some who came along, and then there were some where, you know, the fist had to just sort of say, this is it, the cheese is being moved, and we all have to get on board.
Great, thank you. Mike, how about yourself when you look at what you've been able to accomplish, maybe even more recently from a technology perspective, what are the things that you're most proud of that your team has been able to do?
Well, I think it begins with putting technology at the center of what we do. I was one of the co-founders of a company called Techonomy, which Forbes was an initial angel investor in that, and it was all about teaching the largest enterprises that technology has to be at the center of strategy and needs a seat at the table and at the boardroom in order to really harness the changes that are going on. Forbes, I think, has adopted that really well. We built our own CMS and our own tech platform and tech stack because we realized what we were trying to do, and it was very different than the rest of the market with a contributor network. So we had to build our own tools for it. We couldn't find any off-the-shelf tools that we wanted to customize. So we became a very technology-focused company. And that, to this day, I think really informs the way we think about things. So for instance, a week ago, we made the announcement that we're joining Civil in the blockchain, and it's not. This is not a big money-making idea for us. It is not even a fully formed idea of where the end result will be. It's very much about a curiosity and exploratory sort of approach to technology that we are firm believers that blockchain will be huge and important. We're firm believers that AI. So we have certain premises that are usually first articulated through the magazine and the website in terms of our journalists. So we've hired lots of journalists in these categories. We've created newsletters around it because really our role as media is to inform. And so we start with that kind of information. But inside the company itself, I'm really satisfied with the way people have embraced new technologies and want to see how that can be applied to publishing and how it can be applied specifically to Forbes.
Excellent, excellent. Those are two great examples. And this question I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to look for a volunteer as opposed to give to one or the other. One of the things that in technology we're fond of talking about is failing fast. But we like to talk about it, but I never have gotten a really good example from some of my colleagues of where we failed fast. Do you have any examples of where things didn't go exactly the way you thought they were originally going to go, and didn't net out the way you wanted them to, but you made a pivot and got it back on track?
Joe, we're perfect. How about you? No, not true at all.
Well done. You know what? I think that there have been a couple of different areas, and I'll sort of morph the question a little bit, because I think one of the things that we have found is, when our social reach is such an important part of how we drive engagement and how we monetize our business model. And so, we reach, I think, over 400 million consumers every month across our social platforms, and we're about to hit 100 million on Instagram alone.
Wow.
And so, that is something that is incredibly precious to us, yet we're always sort of testing into what's going to work there. And I think, we know that social media is sometimes very not social and sometimes, exclusive and isolating. And I think one of the things that we really try to do with our social and digital presence is to really foster community. We know that the National Geographic fan and audience really wants to co-create with us. And so I think one of the areas where we have leaned into and embraced is what is the role of platforms for fostering that community. And so, one of those is a digital community that we nurture and manage, which is called Your Shot. It's incredibly core to what National Geographic stands for. It is an online community of photographers, and they're able to interact with each other. They're able to get tips from each other, and our community of professional photographers will come in and give assignments and provide challenges, and we choose one member of that community every month who actually gets to have one of their photos published in the National Geographic print magazine, which is a pretty epic accomplishment if you are a aspiring photographer. So all of that to say that it's within those environments where, we're trying to drive more personalization because the assignments were quite generic. The assignment for this month could be to capture wildlife, and if you're an aspiring photographer that's focused on sort of destination type photography, you don't want to capture a piece of wildlife. So, a lot of what we're testing into and where we fail fast is where we have this kind of assignment-based, work that we do with communities, and we can see when they don't react and how we can pivot. And the same is true with what we publish across our social platforms, with Instagram being the most pristine and our hero account, given all of its affection for the hardcore things that we do, which are photography, and how do we tinker with things like actually trying to promote our television content. And that works better when the content that we're promoting on our television channel is more core to what the brand stands for and our brand values. So I think where we really, and we're able to obviously then pivot and adapt and take things down and rethink about how we present those challenges. But the failing fast really happens around those community-based environments.
Great. Thank you. Mike, anything that you want to share top of mind?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I would say it's a failing fast mentality that you want to instill inside a company, and that there are plenty of examples in terms of big initiatives that we had that got us all whipped into a frenzy thinking this could be the next best thing. And 3 months later, I'm like, hey, whatever happened to such and such? And they're like, it didn't work. And that's all right. And there are probably a dozen examples this year alone.
Great.
A lot of it around productivity software and things like that, that this will be our solution, doesn't work out, and we move on to the next thing.
Right. Going to the next place, you can't do this alone. And so what I'm interested in is, Jill, from your perspective, who are the colleagues that you work with that help you enable the success that you've enjoyed in the role you're in right now?
Across the table at National Geographic? Well, again, I think the partnership with our social editorial team and really building the rapport there to ensure we have the ability to test into brand-led versus editorial-led content has been really important. Obviously, the CTO is a really important partner as well. And the CEO, I think one of the things that's really important to the CEO-CMO relationship is an appreciation for the business. And I think that tension that exists sometimes between marketers who are investing for sort of the long-term health of the brand and for the future versus the short-term focus on profitability. And so obviously our CEO is sort of a core partner who has to be invested in the strategy and really get behind what we're doing. And then, the big thing is actually what we're really trying to work on now is how do we enable kind of SWAT team mentality around content-led projects. And so if it's something that's led by the channel, or if it's something that's led from the editorial side, how do we ensure that we're taking that piece of content and really mobilizing a cross-platform team to make sure that we can optimize it for various platforms? We just did a really compelling story in the magazine, which was entitled The Story of a Face, and it was a story about the youngest person to ever receive a face transplant. It was a young girl who lost her face to an attempted, a suicide attempt. And that was a 2-year journey that our editorial team took with the Cleveland Clinic to document every last angle of that. That's a 9,000-word story that exists in our print publication. There are very few people who have time to, our core audience on the magazine does, still engage with that product, but we wanted to engage with many audiences on that story. So a big part of what I'm trying to do from a brand and content standpoint is get the right players around the table so that we can do an Instagram story that tells that story in 25 chapters. That was our longest ever Instagram story. Creating content for Snapchat, where we created Snaptorials around suicide prevention, creating a short form piece of content that was one of our strongest performing pieces ever on YouTube, and working with the channel to create a little documentary on that. So that's a big part of the role that I play, which is really helping to thread the needle and make sure that a really great story that could live only on one platform has the opportunity to become platform specific and engage with multiple audiences.
That's great. Mike, when you think about it, it's a different angle than from the CMO seat, right? From the CEO seat, who are the enablers of technical transformation for you?
Well, I have a great management staff who runs the operations, and I have to focus a lot more on what is coming down the pike, where we're going to make our next investments, how I'm going to hit the EBITDA numbers for our investors in Hong Kong. And so the way I have a small team when we're making serious decisions, which consists of, because in media, it's really about content, the ad sales side of it, and then the people building it, which I call product and tech. Now, so those three people are kind of my inner circle of where decision-making happens. Beyond that, I have another group of about 14 people who touch all parts of the organization. And that's more about fostering sharing across the organization and getting them all to work as one team. And because we're a media company with journalists, it's great because I have all sorts of resources to tap. So when we built AI into our new CMS, which we launched this summer, and that those AI components are really helping to drive, well, the AI components have led us into other exploration of AI. And I think that is probably going to be the biggest change for us over the next, I'd say 12 months. It's not years out or anything. Right. We've already begun it and can absolutely see a time in the very short future where we have what we call the bionic newsroom, which is not completely machine content, but it's machine content informed by human interaction with it or human direction in there. And we're already well along the way with a lot of potential partners outside, which would bring in that experience. And that's part of kind of the last stool of these internal people I have is also an M&A strategy where we made acquisitions in the past year, and we're going to continue to make acquisitions to bring in that kind of expertise.
Excellent. Yeah. You hit on something there. We talked about the internal partners that you have to make this transformation successful. What about some of those external partners that you've called on and work with?
Yeah, well, Forbes has always been great in that regard too, in that we've always allowed, mostly in ad tech, people to come in and plug into our platform. I'll use one example, Moat. Early on, we helped develop their roadmap by plugging it into Forbes.com, and it informed them as to what they needed. We were able to tell them, boy, it'd be cool if you had this or that, or if it could do this and that. So it really did inform their roadmap. I am terribly sorry we didn't take an equity stake in Moat because it sold for $900 million or something crazy. But again, fostering that kind of openness to working with a lot of different partners from outside, I think has served us very well, because I get more incoming calls than having to go out and seek people out. And so I actually have a team that does kind of winnows through all those incoming calls as to what's most interesting or relevant for us.
Great.
Yeah.
Jill, how about yourself at National Geographic, external partners?
There's the two obvious. Leaning into the topic earlier around frenemies, I think we have a unique relationship with both Instagram and Facebook because of the audiences that we command. Things are changing, obviously, now for us on Facebook. But, we have been in, very collaborative discussions on new platforms like Watch because of our audience and our ability to curate content, and pushing the boundaries of testing new applications on Instagram to see how an audience will respond. And so some of the innovation around that has been interesting. On the other side of the house, a lot of what we're trying to do for National Geographic, like every brand, is to ensure that it stays relevant. And so I mentioned, 9,000 word articles. So you can imagine that the average reader of our magazine is, on the older side. And we're trying to ensure that, through social and other platforms, we're bringing in a younger audience and engaging them in different ways. And so there have been a few, platform-based startups who we're doing some really interesting things with. And we just launched a storytelling challenge on a platform called Wattpad. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Wattpad, but we've had incredible traction. It's a storytelling platform. The average age is like 13 to 21. And the engagements that they have seen on that related to our brand have have exceeded, anything they've ever seen before. And it's kind of encouraging for us to think about those kinds of partnerships where there are younger audiences, and that particular challenge is around really getting at the single-use plastic challenge that we have, and the impact that has on the oceans and the environments. And what's really inspiring about that, in addition to reaching an audience, is to see the incredible passion that young people have around these kinds of important topics and the action that they want to take to be a part of solving those. And so, from the very big to the very small, we explore different platforms that can allow us to reach like-minded audiences on a regular basis.
Great. Now, you both play in the same space, and I'm interested in your perspective on when you're doing longer-term planning. What are some of the things that you're both seeing that are on the horizon that you're either excited about or still forming a point of view about, but you can clearly see them and you know you have to take an action step against them? Mike, maybe you could start?
Yeah. First, I'd say it is interesting that Jill and I are both the brands over 100 years old. And that is a huge competitive advantage, to have that great brand with a forward-thinking or innovative organization and technology driving it. And that, the big thing that catapulting us forward, I think, is globalization. In that, Forbes represents, wherever there's an emerging business market, Forbes represents that badge of success. And we have seen huge growth and huge interest, particularly in Asia and Africa, where there is this really booming emerging business class. People want to be associated with the brand. They want to put our brand on buildings. They want to put it on wealth management software. They want to put it everywhere there because it does have such a strong connotation. For me, the biggest challenge is to make sure that Forbes continues to be credible, great journalism, all the good things that made the brand what it is. And we were delighted to see that Neiman Labs, who isn't always a fan of our contributor model, a recent study, I think it was 38 Media, Forbes came out, I think, 5th of the list, right behind ABC and not even the Wall Street Journal might have been on there. But we came out 5th in terms of most trusted media brands. Excellent. So that kind of thing, you can't build overnight like a lot of pure play media companies try to do. It just doesn't happen. And it's also the thing you have to protect most, I'd say.
Great. Jill, how about yourself?
Well, I think, as you said, a lot of similarities in sort of maintaining the levels of trust and equity. I mean, we have similar requests.
I'd love to go work in Agio.
It's fun. There's so many. We are recruiting amazing talent, particularly young talent, millennials, who feel like they want to be a part of purpose-led brands. I mean, I think about what we used to do at MasterCard to be competitive in the recruiting space around tech, and building a tech hub in New York City, and all of the free food and everything that goes with it. And we're in a pretty old building in DC, and we give away bananas. And we had a really robust pipeline of interns this summer who were thrilled to be a part of what we're building there in this new company. But we have the same thing, as it relates to brands who are focused on what's happening in the environment and sustainability and storytelling with a purpose. They're looking for us to almost badge them. And we have to be really careful about that, right? And sort of that balance of what does that mean for us from protecting the integrity of our brand versus brands who want to sort of really lean into that versus greenwashing. But the other thing, certainly AI is very front top of mind for us. But the other thing is really thinking about the experiential space, and I think it's so ripe for our brand because, with the community of creators that represent the explorers that help us understand the world around us, people who are on expeditions, our photographers, our talent behind the camera and in front of the camera on the television channel. And I think as we seek to really drive more more loyalty and affection from our fans, we're thinking really hard about the experiential space and how do we really leverage all of our assets to lean into that to create new environments for our fans.
Excellent. Well, I think everyone in the room, if you could join me in thanking our panelists for a very informative session.
Thank you.